Snowflakes fell on the mantle and crown as the young queen smiled. November of 1619 was cold, but Elizabeth Stuart, who had just become the Queen of Bohemia, was warmed by love and hope. She had gained a throne, loved her husband, and was expecting a child. Little did anyone know that this complete happiness would last only one winter. Her mother had dreamed so much of the throne for her that she rejected all unfavorable suitors. If they couldn't secure a crown for Elizabeth, they could seek another bride. In fact, even Gustavus Adolphus, the heir to the Swedish throne, was turned away. Anna, Elizabeth's mother, was the daughter of a Danish king, and Sweden and Denmark had always been at odds. One can understand Anna of Denmark's ambitions. She had married the Scottish King James and knew she would soon become Queen of England as well. Elizabeth I had no other obvious heirs. Interestingly, the little girl was named after this very Elizabeth, with hopes for a bright future. However, Anna had no intention of raising her daughter. Almost immediately, Elizabeth was placed under the care of Countess Linlithgow, and it was in the luxurious castle of this lady that the princess spent her childhood years. There, she was absolutely happy. Her older brother Henry became her best friend, while she struggled to get along with her sister. Mary was temperamental and moody, while Henry joked and was always ready to play with her. When Elizabeth turned 7, her namesake passed away. Now, the princess's father had become a double monarch, King of England and Scotland. The children were brought to London for the coronation ceremony, but they were only allowed to watch from the balcony of Whitehall Palace. It was hard to see through the crowd, but Elizabeth shone with excitement and clapped her hands. Everything was about to change. However, the glamorous life in London had to be postponed as the plague broke out. The court scattered to their country estates, and Elizabeth was sent to the home of Lord Harrington, who became her guardian. Her parents insisted she focus on history, geography, dance, music, and language studies. Elizabeth was a dream for her tutor. She grasped concepts quickly, loved to learn, and by the age of 12 had turned into a very educated young lady. She had no idea of the tumultuous events happening around her. The gunpowder plot was underway. Guy Fawkes and his accomplices planned to eliminate the king and his eldest son and place Elizabeth on the throne. But the conspirators were captured before they could ignite the powder. The princess would later learn that she had been just a small step away from the throne. Then, marriage plans began to take shape. James was intrigued by a suitor from the Palatinate, Frederick V, Count of the Rhine and Palatinate. This young Protestant had promising prospects on the continent, but Queen Anna was displeased. Where was the crown? Yet, the moment Elizabeth laid eyes on Frederick, she could think of no one else. And he couldn't take his eyes off her. It was true love at first sight. They were already preparing for a grand wedding when Elizabeth's beloved brother Henry passed away. The girl cried for days on end and refused to continue the preparations. Frederick saved the situation. Your brother would have wanted this. We will be happy together. Elizabeth silently nodded. On Valentine's Day, she became Frederick's wife, and 2 months later, she departed for the Palatinate, her new residence. Elizabeth's lineage was more distinguished than that of her mother-in-law, and King James insisted that this be remembered in Heidelberg. Frederick was agreeable to everything, but his mother disapproved of this situation. Bowing to a daughter-in-law? Since when? Thanks to Elizabeth's intelligence and tact, this delicate matter was resolved without offending anyone. Meanwhile, her husband did everything he could to please her. He renovated the castle and created a magnificent garden. In the Palatinate, the couple welcomed 3 children, naming the eldest after Prince Henry. Once again pregnant, Elizabeth received the news that her husband had been chosen as the King of Bohemia. Preparations for their hurried journey to Prague began. Frederick was crowned in St. Vitus Cathedral, and 3 days later, Elizabeth received her crown. Snow fell earlier than usual, but the queen was overjoyed. She marveled at the ancient city where she was now destined to rule. And when a son, Rupert, was born a month later, it was seen as a good omen. The reign of the new king began with an heir. For an entire winter, Prague celebrated and rejoiced. However, the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire had his own plans for the Bohemian crown. Military conflict ensued. The superior imperial army defeated Frederick's forces at the Battle of White Mountain. Elizabeth began packing again. This time, they needed to flee Prague urgently. She took refuge in a castle near Berlin, where her fifth child, Prince Maurice, was born. The family's situation was complicated by the fact that returning to the Palatinate was impossible. The imperial troops had seized Frederick's lands. The former rulers of Bohemia had to move to The Hague. Dreaming of reclaiming the throne, Frederick knocked on every door. But his father-in-law could not offer support, and negotiations with King Gustavus Adolphus of Sweden fell through. In The Hague, the couple had 8 more children, and for their future, Frederick made another attempt to find allies. But illness intervened. Doctors informed the exiled monarch that he had contracted the plague. Time was running out. Frederick died, far from his wife and children. When Elizabeth learned of his passing, she fainted. From that moment on, Elizabeth's primary goal was to reclaim at least Frederick's hereditary lands. Eventually, her son was able to establish himself in Heidelberg. The Winter Queen, as she was called for her brief reign in Bohemia, tried to arrange advantageous marriages for her daughters, and she succeeded in this as well. However, she also had to endure many tragedies: her brother's execution, the death of King Charles I of England, and the loss of several children. It wasn't until 1661 that Elizabeth Stuart was able to return to her homeland. She hoped to spend her last years there in peace, but fate had already decided otherwise. The former Queen of Bohemia passed away a year later in the house of her youth, on a winter morning when heavy snow began to fall.